Ms. Cantrell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We wanted to take an opportunity tonight just to quickly update you on the second quarter of fiscal year 26. So I was kind of copying over the same presentation from last quarter. High level review, we're looking at cash, revenues, expenses across the different funds. And sorry, this is loud. All right, so cash position, the total cash across all funds of the town was just over 17 million. You can see that we have 4 million, that's that second orange bar right there, in Carter Bank in our checking account, and so that's what we use to operate through. And then we have a savings account there, the large tall orange bar at Truist, that's just under 10 million, it's around 9.8. And then the rest of the accounts are rather small. So the bigger question is, okay, we have 17.1 million cash invested, but whose cash is it? And that's where we have this chart, and it comes in handy. So the first small bar is CMPC, so that stands for the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund. Every time the cemetery makes a sale, a portion of that sale goes into a fund that's supposed to sustain the cemeteries long after those are no longer selling. So that is where that fund comes from. And then we also have the general fund listed there. It's just around $4 million allocated to the general fund. The largest bar, of course, is the electric fund. That's at 8.2 million. And then we have the EDA on there because they are a fiscal agent of the town. And then if you look further to the side, you'll have a little blip there for general capital programs. So this is cash that has been set aside for capital projects in the general fund. Next to that is the same thing, but for the electric fund. And then lastly is a revolving loan fund. You can't see that. It's only around $11,000 in that one.
Now, the EDA, what is that, about 500,000 or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Right on, Mayor.
You've trained me well.
All right. So this is another thing I think is helpful for me is how much cash do we have in the bank versus how much money are we spending a year? So you want to have at least 25%. That's just a general metric there on what we want to keep operations going. And we are hitting that target for most of these funds. So you can see cemetery has no expense because we're just setting funds aside. And then the general fund, you can see that it's around the 4 million and is as high as around 13 million at the moment. And then the electric fund has just under 9 million, and then its budget is at 27 million. And then capital projects, that's a little different because that's one-time money that's associated. And then the electric capital projects is the same, the small bars there. And this is another fun chart. So when you see YOY, that's an abbreviation for year over year. So this is a year over year comparison of cash between all of the different funds. So the blue charts there are fiscal year 25 quarter two, and the orange bars are fiscal year 26 quarter two. The biggest change here is going to be in the general fund. You can see a small drop though in the electric fund as well for operating cash. And then the capital projects funds, they're increasing cash, which means we've identified projects, but they just haven't spent it yet. So kind of like mentioned above, there's a decrease in the operating cash accounts for general fund and electric fund, but an increase in the capital cash accounts for those funds. And the main reason the general fund dropped so significantly is this time last year we still had American Rescue Plan Act funding in the bank that had not been spent by the Bedford Regional Water Authority that has been fully spent as of today. Changing gears, so we talked cash. Is there any questions on cash before I move forward? So this is revenues and expenses. So I've consolidated here what we call the governmental funds. And the biggest governmental fund for us is the general fund. And so as of quarter two, we had $5.7 million in revenue and $5.5 million in expenses. And most of the other funds are very, very small in comparison to that. And then what comprises the general fund revenues? I wanted to take a look at the main revenue areas. So this one right here is property tax comparison. And again, we have a comparison for Q2 of fiscal year 25 in green, and we have Q2 2026 in blue. So real estate taxes are higher year over year for real estate. Personal property taxes are very flat. They're actually slightly less than last year by around $1,000. The penalties and interest are roughly the same, with interest being slightly higher this year over last year.
The 26 being more, is that because of the sales have increased, they're more, the property values are up?
In part that, but I think it's more to do with supplemental bills where real estate, like, I'm trying to think, one of the new construction areas with new
Okay,
residential
yeah.
being put on the books because it's been completed.
Right, okay.
Any other questions on general tax revenue? That was a good question. The next one here, this is what I would call general local taxes. So it's comprised of local sales tax is the first one, and that is slightly less this quarter from last year at the same point in time. You can also see things like cigarette tax. If you go over is the next bars that are displaying, and that's also slightly less than this time last year. And then you can see meals tax is actually slightly higher this time than last year. And then lodging tax is slightly higher, and then you can see interest on investments is significantly down, and that's actually due to the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So we were able to keep the interest on those while they were not spent.
Is this a good time to mention the fact that we are aggressively looking for higher interest returns on our investments?
Certainly, yes. So we've actually gotten quotes because that roughly $9 million that you saw at Truist is earning 3% interest, and so we've had the deputy treasurer call all the local banks for the best rate. It appears that right now the best rate is actually at Select Bank for 3.7% for a 12-month CD or 3.8% for a money market. So we're going to look at splitting up the funds between those two options and getting a higher return on that.
And it's not a lot of money, just want to demonstrate that we're trying.
Mm-hmm. And what we do is we actually allocate interest earnings because we pull the cash resources together. So based on each fund's allocated cash, they get a portion of how much interest we earn. So because the electric fund now has a higher percentage of cash than the general fund, is earning more interest in the electric fund, which is very good for that fund.
Thank you.
Any other questions on local revenues?
What are the actual numbers for the local sales and use tax?
Yes, I do. One second. It is $125,000 this year and $202,000 last year. And a part of that could be timing. That's something that we actually receive from Bedford County. So sometimes if they're behind on coding the receipts, it can take a little bit of time for us to get the money. I'm going to hope that that's what it is at this point in time. Any other questions on local taxes? All right. And as you can see, I failed to mention it, but meals tax is by far the largest local tax that we receive and get.
Yeah.
So when we're talking numbers, we're talking this year we've received $787,000 for Q2, and last year we received $781,000. So that's very good, especially because we have had meals close, and I'm seeing that meals tax actually grew is a very encouraging sign. And then lastly, for the general fund revenues, I wanted to break out some of the revenues that we receive from the state. So you can see rolling stock tax there. That's the one that we receive from the state. Mobile home titling tax, that's only like $100, so that's not visible on this chart. And then the Commonwealth current personal property taxes. You probably are familiar with this as the PPTRA, the Personal Property Tax Relief Act. So this is what we get from the state to apply relief to our bills. The next thing, and that's flat. It's been frozen since the early 2000s. The next one is auto rental tax, and this has actually been going up, I believe in part because the town's participating in the lease tax program, so we're kind of paying ourselves back through taxes on that. And then the last one is communications tax. This is going down, and it has been going down for several years. If you look at the 10-year trend, it's just a continuous downward line. This is tied to landlines primarily and cable for TV. So as people are giving up their landlines and giving up their TV, this tax is going to continue to go downward unless they expand what it applies to.
And I think, just comment, I think our rental car place is closing in town, so. I think they're gonna be operating out of Forest in Lynchburg.
That's sad to hear.
It's the Enterprise, at least that's what the information I had, just for your information.
Any questions on state tax revenue?
Do you anticipate the Commonwealth current personal property tax continuing, or any word on that? Or?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's a change in the legislature.
Yeah. We don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would hope it wouldn't go down. I would hope it would at least stay level, but
We don't. Yeah.
it's hard to say.
A lot of
They both had
uncertainty.
mentioned it going down when they were running, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, of course, they were talking about doing that for individuals. The net effect on us is still subject to, I mean, basically, that's a flat number for us. It's $280,000.
Yeah.
Has been for 20 years.
Yeah. We shall see.
And that's with and then we calculate our relief based on that, which turns out to be a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, if we took the $280,000 and we calculated the relief on the first $20,000 based on vehicle, our actual relief percentage would be around 34%, but we're giving residents 100% on the first. So there's a local relief that we are supplying in addition to that to make whole the first 20,000.
And I know they appreciate it.
All right, so I switched colors because we're switching gears. So we reviewed most of the revenue sources for the town. Had some good news. There's some that are going up. There's also some that are trending down that we're keeping an eye on. So if we switch to expenditures, we're seeing mostly an increase across most of our expenditure categories. Not surprising with what we're hearing on inflation and the economy. It's hitting our town operational budgets as well. So there's increases across pretty much all of the administration functions, excluding personnel, which is probably timing on that one. Same with our independent auditor. That one will be higher by the end of the year, but we had a delay on our federal guidance for a single audit, so we're still completing the single audit portion of our audit, and that will be billed once complete. Then financial and information technology services, we did have increases across all of these categories, the largest being information technology. And then we also had increase in public safety. So you can see police department is the primary increase driver on that, but we also had an increase in the fire department as well. And then this one looks really odd. Well, we're having increases across the board except community development. Well, that's because we had a CDBG grant last year that really inflated those expenditures. So this is more of a grant timing story on why it actually decreased from last year. And you can see the transportation and safety grant, that's the Otter Bus, so that has actually increased year over year as well. And the last department, well, functional department, is going to be Public Works, and we have had decreases in the Public Works department as well. Most of that, though, is related to state funding, like the Virginia Department of Transportation, or VDOT funding, is down significantly year over year. General Properties is also slightly down year over year, but we have a very large increase in maintenance of the municipal building, which we know we have issues with our building. We're seeing it now hit on the expense side. And the maintenance of motor vehicles is higher as well. That's our garage. And then our last one, so you heard me mention the American Rescue Plan Act. We are fully spent. but it was a large decrease from last year to this year. And then debt service is pretty much flat, and then same for transfers. Slight increase in transfers, but overall fairly flat. And that is our general fund expenditures. So slight increase in real estate tax for the fund. Most other revenues were fairly flat. And then we have had increased year-over-year costs in most all of our expenditure categories. And then the areas with grant activity had decreases or large variances. Any questions on expenditures?
I did have one, you go back on the maintenance of motor vehicles. Was the increase because they're older or just the cost of maintaining them? They're going up.
I think that was more of salaries associated with that, but
Okay.
let me see. Yes, we're allocating more of the compensation here now than we were last year.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
So on the general fund analysis, so everything looks, revenue-wise, except for real estate, looks flat, but our expenditures are increasing, so
Yep.
we're losing money.
Well,
In a way,
it could be timing wise too, because real estate is our largest revenue source. So seeing our largest revenue source is a good thing. And we only get that in twice a year. We get it in December and then we get it again in June. So hopefully that increase carries us in June, and we're not gonna see this because budget, even though they're higher year over year, they're still not necessarily higher than budget. They're pretty close. If you're looking at the December financial statements, you want to see around 50% of their budget spent, or 6 months of the year. And so as we're looking through a lot of these categories, they're close or slightly over. Like town managers at 48.7%, town attorneys at 51.2%, personnel's at 42.7%, treasurer's at 50.8%. So like looking through, they're very close. It's not concerning yet to say like, hey, we're gonna have a big drop in cash. But that's something that I recommend when you have time to go through the detailed financial report, is to always take a look and see how it meets the metric on number of months. Whether that's 4 divided by 12 for the November statements, or for the October statements, or if it's 6 divided by 12 for the December. That's something that I personally like to do. I go through and I check.
Do you sometimes see that some of the departments spend all of some funds ahead of time, which makes it,
Yes.
use it a little bit?
Definitely, and with insurance, we pay it quarterly, so you kind of know, okay, well, that first month of the quarter, that's going to be way over, and there's not going to be anything until after for the Versa and stuff like that. I'll normally make a note timing next to it.
Yeah. When was the general assessment, or was it last year?
So I actually heard that they're doing it now, and it's going to be effective 2027. And so
Okay.
our residents should be getting information in the mail from the county commissioner's office on the reassessment.
Okay.
And that's not handled by the town. We actually use the county's assessment. The main reason we do that is because towns are allowed to use county assessments for free. So there's no additional cost to the town to do that. So it's a good deal for us.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I thought they had one ongoing, or started last year or late last year and through this year, and then we'll see the results next year. Yeah,
hopefully by the fall, I would hope.
yeah, okay, good deal. Thank you.
All right, any other expenditure questions? You know where to find me. If you have them later, feel free to ask me. Okay, so looking at enterprise funds, and this is accounting terminology, that's more of our business operation funds. So for us, we only have a couple, solid waste fund and electric fund. Now we do break out our capital projects into a separate fund for all of our funds. So that's why that's broken out separately. So for the quarter so far, We have revenues of 11.9 million and expenditures of 10.5 million. However, I do want to caveat this to say, we record billing at the time as a revenue at the time that it's billed, not when cash is received. So there is a cash lag from the point in time that we bill customers until we actually receive it. So when you see revenue figures in the financial statements, always keep in mind that this is amount billed, not necessarily the amount received in the bank. Okay, so looking into the electric fund, which is by far our largest fund for the enterprise, we have different categories for our revenues. The first one is sale of electricity. This is more of our general base revenue that is coded to here. Then we have other very small accounts. It's electricity sales on the open market, penalties and fees. We have a gross receipts tax that we have to pay to the state for local and state tax. And then we also have power cost adjustment. That's the next one that registers really on this graph. And then we have renewable energy charge, and then we have recoveries and rebates in the fund. So primarily the two ones for billing are going to be sale of electricity and the power cost adjustment line items. And you can see that year over year, the base rate is down, the sale of electricity, but the power cost adjustment is up year over year. And the difference between those two is around $1.5 million. And then if we're looking at expenditures, kind of similar to the previous chart, the power cost adjustment is going to start matching that purchase power cost. So the rate change that the consultant proposed in October actually moved purchase power and power generation costs into a separate rate so that we can clearly see it in the financial statements. Before, a portion of the power cost was included in the sale of electricity. So it wasn't very clear to an end user reading this report how much of that sale of electricity went to support our purchase power and power generation. So having the rate broken out, the intent is that we can look through our financial statements and very easily see if the amount we're billing is also the amount that we're paying or collecting. So if we look here, we had a purchase power costs around 80% of our total operating for the fund, and we had around a $1 million increase year over year associated with that cost. We also had an increase in transmission, if you can see that, and that was mostly supplies and expenses, so things like wire and pole. We had budgeted, unfortunately, around, I think, $166,000 for the year. Let me see. We budgeted $167,000-ish for the year, and we've spent $311,000 halfway through the year. So we're at 100% of our budget, doubled. So, and that's one we're keeping an eye on, especially is the materials and supplies for transmission and distribution. I know, scary figure. Sorry to hit you with that so early in the evening, but just wanted everyone to be aware that that is something we're keeping a very close eye on, and
Well, it's a volatile.
we have to have it.
It's a volatile business.
Yeah.
I mean,
And some of that goes to the new development. We have to serve it, and
Yep.
that has a cost of doing business as well.
Exactly.
Yep.
Any future thought on AMI metering?
That costs money too.
Yes.
That's my thought.
No, but in the long run, it's a time saver.
I agree.
This is true. Yes, you would have my support. I like new
You gotta-
technology.
You gotta invest money to make money. Or
Yes.
save money.
Yes. All right. Any questions on electric revenues or expenses while I have these charts up?
This last chart that we got, the transmission and distribution lines, that's our lines, that's correct, not what we're paying someone else to bring electricity to.
No, this is just Yes, correct. Our costs that our department are paying, invoices coming through us for materials and supplies for transmission.
Okay.
Is some of that due to the new developments and stuff coming through, or is that
It very well could
Yeah,
be.
and
Yeah.
it's also repairing things when they break.
for sure?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think when I'm seeing quotes come in from the electric department, everything is going up steadily anytime we're getting bids out there.
Yeah. And it takes longer to get it.
That's also true.
And also, always, if you have any questions on the full line items, please let me know. I know this is a very high-level report, but we have also started putting these on the town's website as well. So if you want to look at the pretty PDF copy, that's available, and highly recommend everybody to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention is kind of like we were talking about growth a second ago, is how about our customer counts year over year? So we've actually grown 100 customers just in year over year from one quarter to the next. And for us, I also wanted to mention, we have 7,070 customers. And in finance, we only have 2 full-time employees supporting utility billing. So it's quite a bit for 2 full-time employees to support, but they do an excellent job, very detail-oriented. But we do sometimes get overwhelmed with the call volume between 2 people.
So is the staffing adequate at this time? I mean, you doing okay?
No,
Or-
I'm sorry, I'll answer for you.
Or is that a budget time discussion?
That's a budget and a priority discussion.
I got you.
Yeah. We're in high spirits.
Well, I've been around that bunch. You do have a good crew there, very good. And they're good at what they do.
So quickly summarizing this is that you can definitely see the impact of the rate change between the decrease in the sale of electricity and the increase of the power cost adjustment revenue line items when compared to the prior year. And then also wanted to point out the year-over-year increase in purchase power costs and transmission supply costs specifically. And if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out anytime. I have my phone number and email available on the screen.
You really do. Any questions? All right. And I guess we are done. So what are we gonna do now?
Go Smoke.
Take a 5-minute break. Take a break.
We'll get here for a break.
This is adjourned.